Now, people signed these, and I sat in a class on the study of Daniel, and they had no idea what they believed. None. And they had signed this. And I got to tell you what, when I got to that statement of faith, I read the entire thing, and two words stood out at me, and I said, I need to call them and find out what their opinion on these two words is, because if they disagree, I can't sign the statement of faith. And it was on the words total depravity. What does that mean? So I called them up, and it was exactly what I agree with. What's that? Oh, I thought somebody asked. Anyway, so those two words, I agreed with their analysis of the concept of total depravity, and I joined the college. But we sat in this Daniel class, and these people had no idea what they believed as far as eschatology, which is one of the points you had to agree with. All right? Until one of the guys who was a pastor had no idea what he believed. He says, well, I'm back and forth on the issue. I read this commentary, I read that commentary. We read this particular verse, and it wasn't even part of the study. It was just somebody brought it up for some reason, and he said, I now believe in Israel being part of the eschatology, the study of last things. They are not done at AD 70, but in fact they have a future plan and purpose for them. Why? Because God divided the nations according to the sons of Israel. If God chose them and the nations are chosen for that purpose, he says, who am I to fight against God? So this one verse really affected that guy's life. But, you know, I wish that he had thought that through before he joined the seminary and signed the statement of faith. But the whole point is that, you know, you need to be honest with yourself in everything, no matter how small it is. Because if not, if you're willing to take out this line of a statement of faith, then you really can do the same thing with the Bible as well. And if you can do that with the Bible, as we talked about yesterday, I talked with a few people, if you take out one verse from the Bible and say, I don't agree with this, the entire tapestry unfolds. And my mom knows there's a person that, I want to deviate for a second. Can I do this? This is really a fun story. You're going to laugh. You're going to laugh when you hear this. I got an email from a lady named Darlene. I won't give a last name, but anyway, I got an email from a lady named Darlene. She says, your mom says you know where to get the verses in the Bible, speaking of laying on the hands and praying for people and being healed. And I said, oh, absolutely. There's one in John 16, and there's one in James, okay? I went there, and she was asking about St. Boniface, where I used to attend growing up. They have a healing mission. And my grandmother was in a healing mission for many years, and I do believe in faith healing, because I was faith healed. My mom will attest to that. I had a very bad ear infection, and it was taken care of, and since then my ears have not been what they were. So that is true, but faith, there are two ways of applying faith. One is, Jesus said to the apostles, they said, why can't we drive out this demon? And he says, because you lack faith. So faith is actively needed on the part of the people healing, and it's also actively needed on the part of the healer. The woman touched the Lord's tzitzit at the end of his talit, and she was healed of 12 years of bleeding. Okay, so faith works together. So anyway, this lady called me, and I told her why I disagreed with the way that those verses were being applied. And I said, well, and the Spirit of God isn't there anyway, at that church. And, I just kind of made it as a side comment, right? And I emailed it back to her, and she came back irate almost at my, how can you say that? And blah, blah, blah. And come to find out, it was a different Darlene. I thought it was my friend. So anyway, so the cat's already out of the bag. I told her exactly why I believed about the Episcopal Church and what they hold on to, homosexual pastors and, free abortions and women being ordained as ministers and the whole thing. And I said, they are anti-biblical. And the Spirit of God is not going to reside in a place that puts this type of stuff in his face. But the whole point of that is that if you take out anything, and she said, here was her response to me. She was very nice so in her response, and she continues to get my daily Bible verse, which I thought she was going to just cancel immediately, but she was very nice in her response, but here was her response. Well, I believe in the love of God, but all these other things in the Bible I just disagree with. And I thought, then you have no sure foundation. Because, Muslims teach about the love of God. They teach about God's mercy. And, here's my thought on this, and I've said this many times. This tells us about Jesus and nothing else. There are a couple references to Jesus outside the Bible, and they are innocuous at best. It would be like saying Diane lived here, and she was a nice lady, and she did these things, and that would be it. I mean, it was just something that you wouldn't start worshiping Diane based on those verses, right? Or the commentary of Pliny the Younger or whatever. This is all we have right here that tells us about Jesus. Okay? This is it.
But it also tells us in Revelation somewhere in the Old Testament that Better not add to or
That's right.
subtract.
You don't add to or subtract from it, but this reveals Jesus, and what does Jesus do? He reveals the Father. If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. If you have a faulty Jesus, you have a faulty God. Okay? That's why when you listen to a sermon in church, when you listen to Charlie in Sunday school, I say it all the time, go check. You are responsible, not the people that are telling you. They will be held more accountable. James 3:1, brethren, not many of you should be purposed to be teachers, knowing that those who teach will be judged more strictly, right? But this tells us of Jesus. Jesus tells us of the Father. You are responsible. And she says, I don't need all the rest of that. All I need to do is focus on the love of Jesus. Guess what? That's a faulty Jesus. That's all there is to it, because he demands a lot more of people that call on his name once they've called on his name. All he asked for is for us to call on his name. She could be just as saved as anybody else. But there is something more that comes after that moment, and that's rewards and losses. And I'd rather have a full barrel when I walk up to the Lord than a full teacup. Okay? So you think what you want, and there you go. Okay, total diversion. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, this tells us that the idea of sons of God and sons of Israel are used synonymously. In addition to that, there are other ancient texts that speak of this, and unfortunately, I do not have them written down because I can't find that thing, but the Symmachus, the Theodotion, I believe the Samaritan Pentateuch, they all point to the same concept that runs through sons of God, sons of Israel. All right? If I can find that note, I will bring it in and read it next week, just so that you know I'm not blowing smoke, but I can't find it in this Bible, so that means it's in the little thing I used to carry my Bible around in. Anyway, so what is being said here in 6:2, after all of that 30 minutes of talking, is that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. God had, from the time of Seth, a chosen line of people. Okay? Oh, actually, he had it from the time of Abel. Abel was favored. Cain's offering wasn't. There was a chosen line. And this thread runs all the way through the Bible. God is working in redemptive history to come to a particular person. God incarnate, Jesus Christ. That line is to remain undefiled. That line is to remain pure for God's purposes. And this is the way he works. And if you follow the Bible, as you're reading it, you will see this, the concept of divine election. Esau, or Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated, it says in Malachi. Before they had done anything right or wrong, according to Paul, God had divinely elected Jacob over Esau. Same thing with Isaac and Ishmael, the son of promise, the son of promise, the son of promise. The second replacing the first, David replacing Saul. All the way through, these things are pointing again and again. Places replace other places. People replace other people. But God is preserving a line. That's why the Jewish people were selected, and they were given a commandment to be ye holy as I am holy. And he told them how to live, because he is ushering in the Messiah who will fulfill the law that none of us can fulfill. Okay? So, it says here, the sons of God saw the daughters of men. These are the non-godly line. These are the people that came from Cain. They came from outside of the line of Seth. And they are intermarrying with them. They are defiling the line that God has ordained through which the Messiah would come. Okay? That is what this is speaking of. Go ahead.
So you're saying that when it says the sons of God, that means
the sons
of Israel.
No, the son Israel had not yet been born. It is the godly line.
Okay,
that is the godly line. As I said now, there are about 6 possible interpretations of them. All of the other ones deviate into what I would call the goofy. They get into angels sleeping with men. And then you have the Nephilim, these giant men, which are a half-breed. But of course, that is dispelled because there were Nephilim after the flood. And it says at the flood, all flesh was killed except for Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives. So, in other words, you have to be very careful when you look at these things to take everything in context. And it's not just a simple study, okay? You have to... in other words, people will say, well, this is angels, it's a super breed of men, and blah, blah, blah. And they get into all of these things because they didn't go to the next step and look at the next thing. And they didn't look at the footnotes. The footnotes will tell you what people are thinking and why. Footnotes generally come from what are called margin notes. Margin notes, when translators would make a translation, they would put in the margin, this particular copy of this transcript says this, but we're translating it this way. And this has been done throughout history. If you go to the old Jewish texts, they'll have margin notes saying this is another possible translation based on this particular manuscript. And this went on through the Greek text as well. We have 5,686 Greek texts from the original language, and they have margin notes all over them saying that this came from the Septuagint, this came from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and and that's what we're doing here. We just now call them footnotes rather than margin notes, okay?
Charlie, so if I understand this correctly, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man, we're talking about two separate
lines. You have the line of Seth, and you have the line of Cain, or whoever else is not of the line of Seth. So they're just men. That's all they are. They're men. They're not chosen by God. They're not the sons of God. They're not the B'nai Elohim. God said, you are my sons. Okay, so going back to the term, how many sons does God have that the guy wouldn't allow me to answer? Here's the answer. It depends on the context. God has one begotten son. That is Jesus Christ. It says in the book of Hosea, you will all be called sons of God. So God has many sons. It's referring back to here, B'nai Elohim, okay? So it depends on the context. Israel is my firstborn son at the Exodus. So the people of Israel are God's sons, okay? It depends on the context, but when we speak of the great son, we're speaking of the only begotten. And that's why I said in the sermon I gave on 23 January, when you quote John 3:16, always use the term begotten. Don't use one and only. Don't use his only or whatever, because it's not correct. It's not a correct translation. It's a correct translation. It's not a correct application. The application when speaking of Jesus Christ is he is the only begotten, monogenes, single generated of the Father. Okay, that is very important. So when you use that, begotten is correct, the others are not correct. Okay, took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, for indeed he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So we have this long span of life. Now, okay, 969 years was Methuselah, 777 was Lamech, and all these different people were living long times. God says, the wickedness is abounding. These people are interbreeding. One verse is complementing another. He's saying that this is not going to work the way that it's working. I am going to cut the lives short because wickedness, 900 years in a fallen state is a long time to do a lot of wickedness. How much can we bring about in 70 or 80 years? A lot. You look at 3 years ago we had one president, now we have another president. Although I didn't really agree with the first president, the second president I disagree with even more, okay? I'm not giving a political statement here, I'm just simply saying that one of them has a different idea about how things should be run. Okay, if we continue on that path, we are going to have a different America than maybe some of the people that elected the last president wanted. And so we would call that wickedness, or we would call this wickedness, depending on how we're looking at it. They are standing here saying that, the anti-abortionists are saying the abortionists are wicked, and the abortionists are saying the anti-abortionists are wicked. But only one can be true, okay? But the whole point is that wickedness abounds, and the Lord says, I'm going to cut this short. Now, eventually, he cut it down to how long? From what? 70 years, 80 if the Lord favors him, or something like that. That's from Psalm 90, okay, the oldest psalm in the Bible, written by Moses. Oldest psalm in the Bible. Predates David. Anyway, David wrote lots of psalms, but yes, Psalm 90, and he says that he'll cut man's lifespan to 70 or 80 years. Go ahead.
So did he do this before the flood?
This is before the flood, and it is setting up the stage for the flood. Okay, that's what's happening. Ken, you missed the best 20 minutes ever in this class. I'm sorry, buddy. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. Are you feeling okay? You look...
Oh, yeah, I just haven't had a lot of sleep.
It looks like it. Is everything okay?
Yeah, I took the boys to Universal and...
Oh, that'll do it. Well, that's your fault. How's Regina?
She's doing really well. She had to work today. She said she'll have some information for you today.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, anyway, here we go. Tell her I said hi. And let's see here. So 120 years, there were giants. This is the Nephilim. Now, do you know that... what's that?
Yeah, what is that?
Okay, we're going to talk about that now. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God, okay, who I have already said I do not believe are angels.